The first thing I remember is the sound of glass shattering. My birthday cake, a simple chocolate one with blue candles, lay splattered across the kitchen floor. The room was filled with the sharp scent of burnt wax and the bitter tang of betrayal. My son, Daniel, stood over me, his chest heaving, his fist still clenched. My cheek throbbed where he'd struck me. My own son, my only child. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. I tasted blood in my mouth. The world seemed to tilt, the kitchen lights flickering above us. My wife, Linda, stood frozen by the sink, her hands pressed to her mouth. My daughter-in-law, Rachel, hovered in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. Or was it satisfaction? I couldn't tell anymore. Daniel's voice was a low growl. "You're going to sign the papers, Dad. Today. We're not leaving until you do." I looked up at him, searching for the boy I'd raised. The boy who used to beg for one more bedtime story. Who cried when he lost his first dog. Who once promised he'd always take care of me. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man I barely recognized, his face twisted with greed and anger. I pushed myself up, my hands shaking. "No," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I won't do it." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake." I wiped the blood from my lip and met his gaze. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Linda stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Daniel, please, this isn't the way." He ignored her, turning to Rachel. "Get the papers." Rachel disappeared down the hall, her heels clicking on the hardwood. I heard her rifling through drawers in my study, the sound sharp and invasive. I felt exposed, stripped of every ounce of authority I'd ever had in my own home. Linda knelt beside me, her eyes shining with tears. Are you all right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. My face burned, my pride even more so. I wanted to scream, to rage, to throw them all out, but I was tired. So tired. Rachel returned, a stack of documents in her hands. She slapped them on the table, her expression cold. "Sign them, Richard. It's time." I glanced at the top page, power of attorney. The next, a transfer of all my assets, my house, my savings, the small cabin by the lake I'd built with my own hands. Everything I'd worked for, everything Caroline and I had dreamed of, laid out in black and white. I looked at Daniel. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed a pen and shoved it toward me. "Sign." I stared at the pen, my mind racing. I thought of Caroline, gone these 5 years, her laughter still echoing in the halls. I thought of the promises I'd made to her, the legacy we'd hoped to leave behind. I thought of Daniel as a boy, his hand in mine, his trust absolute. I set the pen down. "No." Daniel's face darkened. "You're forcing my hand, Dad." I stood, my legs unsteady. "Then do what you have to do, but I won't be bullied in my own home." Daniel's fist clenched again. For a moment I thought he might hit me a second time. Instead, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Rachel followed, her face a mask of fury. Linda stayed, her shoulders shaking, with silent sobs. I stood in the wreckage of my birthday, the cake melting into the floor, the candles still smoldering. I felt old. I felt alone. But beneath the pain, something else began to stir, a cold, steady resolve. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one. That night, I sat in my study, the documents spread out before me. I read every line, every clause, every trap they'd set. I saw how carefully they'd planned it, how they'd waited until my guard was down, until I was surrounded, dead and outnumbered. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good kind I'd been saving for a special occasion. I sipped it slowly, letting the burn steady my nerves. I thought of Caroline again. Her voice in my ear. "Don't let them take what's yours, Richard, not without a fight." I opened my laptop and began to type. An email to my lawyer, Mark. Subject, urgent. I attached photos of the documents, described what had happened, and asked for a meeting first thing in the morning. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, twisted with anger, his fist coming down. I heard Rachel's voice, cold and sharp. I felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of loss. At dawn, I showered, dressed, and drove to Mark's office. The city was quiet, the streets washed clean by overnight rain. I parked outside the old brick building, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of concern. "You look like hell, Richard." I managed a weak smile. "You should see the other guy." He led me into his office. The walls lined with books and framed degrees. I handed him the documents, watching as his eyes narrowed with each page. "This is bad," he said finally, "but not impossible. You haven't signed anything. That's good, but you need to be careful. They're desperate." I nodded. "I'm done being careful." Mark leaned forward, his voice low. "Do you trust Linda?" I hesitated. "I think so, but I don't know any more." He nodded. "Then trust yourself, and trust me. We'll get through this." I left his office feeling lighter, the first glimmer of hope breaking through the darkness. When I returned home, the house was empty. Linda had left a note on the kitchen table. "Gone to stay with Sarah for a few days. I need time to think." I read the note twice, the words blurring. I felt abandoned, but I understood. She was caught in the middle, torn between her husband and her son. I spent the day cleaning up the mess from the night before. I swept up the broken glass, scrubbed the cake from the floor, and threw out the ruined candles. I tried to erase the evidence, but the memory lingered. That evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun set over the garden. The air was cool, the sky streaked with gold and purple. I thought about the years I'd spent building this life, the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd chased. I wondered if it had all been for nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "We're not done, Dad. You'll regret this." I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched. I typed a reply, then deleted it. There was nothing left to say. As darkness fell, I heard footsteps on the gravel drive. I stood, heart pounding, as Daniel and Rachel appeared at the gate. They didn't come inside. Instead, they stood in the shadows, watching the house, their faces unreadable. I closed the door, locked it, and sat in the dark, waiting for morning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windows. The house felt emptier than ever. I made coffee, the old routine grounding me, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where the cake had fallen. My cheek was still swollen, a dull ache reminding me of everything that had changed. I called Linda, but she didn't answer. I left a message, my voice steadier than I felt. "I hope you're safe. I love you. Call me when you can. I spent the morning gathering documents, bank statements, property deeds, insurance papers. I wanted to be ready for whatever Daniel and Rachel tried next. I made copies of everything, storing them in a locked drawer in my study and a backup folder on my computer. By noon, the rain had stopped. I drove to the cabin by the lake, the one Caroline and I had built with our own hands. The drive was long and winding, the tree arching overhead, the world washed clean by the storm. The cabin was just as I remembered, quiet, sturdy, filled with memories. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cool and musty, the scent of pine and old books lingering. I walked through the rooms, touching the worn wood, the faded curtains, the photographs on the mantel. Caroline's smile greeted me from every corner. I sat on the porch, watching the lake shimmer in the afternoon light. I thought about the life we'd built, the love we'd shared, the son we'd raised. I wondered where it had all gone wrong. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You can't hide from us forever. We know about the cabin. I looked around, heart pounding. The woods were silent, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. I realized that Daniel and Rachel were willing to go further than I'd imagined. I locked up the cabin and drove back to town, my mind racing. I called Mark, told him about the message. He advised me to document everything, to keep a record of every threat, every encounter. That night, I slept with the lights on, a baseball bat by my bed. I dreamed of Caroline, her voice calm and steady. You're stronger than you think, Richard. Don't let them break you. The next day, I met Mark at his office. He had news. I did some digging. Daniel and Rachel are in debt, serious debt. Credit cards, loans, even a second mortgage on their house. They need your assets to bail themselves out. I felt a surge of anger. So this is all about money. Mark nodded. It usually is. I left his office with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for Caroline's memory, for the life we'd built, for the dignity I refused to surrender. That evening, as I was locking up, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I peered through the curtains and saw Daniel's truck. He sat behind the wheel, staring at the house, his face shadowed and unreadable. I waited, breath held, but he didn't get out. After a few minutes, he drove away, tears crunching on the gravel. The days blurred together. Linda still hadn't called. I left messages, each one shorter than the last. I tried to focus on the things I could control, my finances, my health, my home. One afternoon, I received a letter from the bank. Someone had tried to access my accounts using my personal information. I called Mark, who advised me to change all my passwords, to alert the bank to be vigilant. I realized that Daniel and Rachel were getting desperate. Their attempts were becoming bolder, more reckless. I installed new locks on the doors, set up security cameras, and told my neighbors to keep an eye out for anything unusual. Late one night, I heard footsteps outside my window. I grabbed the bat and crept to the living room, heart pounding. The motion sensor light flicked on, illuminating a figure in the yard. It was Daniel. He stood there for a moment, staring at the house, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, I found a note taped to the front door. "This isn't over. You owe us." I tore it down, anger burning in my chest. I called Mark, who told me to file a police report. The officer who came was sympathetic but non-committal. "Family disputes are tricky," he said, "but keep documenting everything." I spent the day at the cabin, seeking solace in the quiet. I walked the shoreline, skipping stones across the water, remembering the days when Daniel was a boy, when life was simpler, when love was enough. I realized that I couldn't go back. The only way forward was through. That evening, as I was leaving the cabin, I found fresh tire tracks in the mud. Someone had been there, watching, waiting. I drove home, every shadow a threat, every sound a warning. The following week, the tension in my chest never eased. I moved through my days like a man in enemy territory, always glancing over my shoulder, always waiting for the next blow. I kept the police report number taped to the fridge, just in case. Linda finally called. Her voice was thin, tired. "Richard, I'm sorry, I just needed space. Daniel's been calling me, saying you're being unreasonable. He says you're hiding things from the family." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to shout, "Linda, he tried to force me to sign everything over. He hit me. He's not the boy we raised." She was silent for a long moment. "I know, I don't know what to do." "Come home," I said softly. "We'll figure it out together." She didn't answer right away. "I need a little more time. I love you, Richard." "I love you too," I whispered. But the line had already gone dead. That night, I heard a crash outside. I rushed to the porch and found my mailbox smashed, letters scattered in the street. Among them was a single envelope, my name scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. Inside was a photograph of the cabin taken from the woods. On the back he'd written, "You can't keep it from us." I called Mark, my hands shaking. "He's stalking me. He's threatening the cabin now." Mark's voice was calm but urgent. "Richard, you need to consider a restraining order, and you need to move your most important documents somewhere safe. Maybe even a safe deposit box." I spent the next day gathering everything. Deeds, insurance, Caroline's letters, even the old family photos. I drove to the bank and rented a box, locking away the pieces of my life that mattered most. I changed my routines, never taking the same route twice, never leaving the house at the same time. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, but I refused to be a victim. One afternoon, as I returned from the bank, I found Rachel waiting in my driveway. She stepped out of her car, her face pale and drawn. "We need to talk," she said. I kept my distance. "About what?" She looked down, twisting her wedding ring. "Daniel's out of control. He's drinking. He's angry all the time. Blames you for everything. He says if you don't give him what he wants, he'll make you pay." I felt a flicker of pity, but I kept my guard up. "He already has." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Richard. I never wanted it to go this far." I nodded, the anger in me softening just a little. "It's not too late to do the right thing, Rachel." She shook her head. "I don't know what that is anymore." She got back in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway, the weight of her words pressing down on me. That night, I sat in the living room, the house silent around me. I thought about Daniel, about the boy he'd been, about the man he'd become. I wondered if there was anything left to save. I poured myself a drink and stared at the old family photo on the mantel. Caroline, Daniel, and me, arms around each other, smiling in the summer sun. I wondered how we'd come to this. The phone rang. It was Mark. "Richard, I have news. Daniel tried to access your accounts again. The bank flagged it and called me. They're taking it seriously now." I felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Mark. Stay vigilant," he said, "and Richard, don't let him scare you out of your own life." The next morning, I found a brick thrown through my front window. Attached was a note. "Last warning. Sign the papers or else." I called the police, filed another report, and replaced the glass myself. I refused to let Daniel see me rattled. Days passed. Linda returned home, her face drawn and tired. She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Richard. I should have believed you." I held her, feeling some of the tension melt away. "We'll get through this, together." We changed the locks again, installed more cameras, and made a plan. Linda would stay with her sister for a while, just in case. I would keep Mark updated on everything. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Daniel's truck pulled up. He got out, his face red, his movements jerky. "Dad, this is your last chance," he shouted. "Sign the papers or I'll make sure you regret it." I stood, meeting his gaze. "I'm not afraid of you, Daniel. Not anymore." He glared at me, then turned and drove away, tires spinning in the gravel. That night, I heard footsteps outside my bedroom window. I grabbed the bat and crept to the window, heart pounding. I saw Daniel standing in the shadows, watching the house. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the new window. I felt the bruises on my face, the ache in my bones, but I also felt something new. A quiet, unbreakable resolve. I would not let Daniel destroy what was left of my life. Linda called from her sister's house. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. "I just want this to end." She sighed. "I wish I could help." "You are helping," I told her. "Just knowing you're safe gives me strength." After we hung up, I called Mark. "I want to move forward with the restraining order," I said, "and I want to update my will. Everything goes to Linda and the charity Caroline loved. Daniel gets nothing." Mark's voice was firm. "I'll take care of it. And Richard, don't let your guard down." I spent the day at the cabin, cleaning, fixing the porch steps, tending the garden. The work soothed me, reminded me of better times. I found an old photo of Caroline, her smile bright, her eyes full of hope. I tucked it into my wallet, a talisman against the darkness. That evening, as I drove home, I noticed a car following me. I took a few extra turns, doubled back, but the car stayed with me. My heart pounded as I pulled into the driveway. The car slowed, then sped off into the night. I stood in the yard, the silence pressing in. I realized I was being watched, hunted in my own town. The next day, Mark called with news. "The restraining order is in place. If Daniel comes near you or the call the police immediately." I thanked him, feeling a measure of relief. I updated my will, leaving everything to Linda and the charity. I wrote a letter to Daniel, explaining my decision, and left it with Mark to deliver if anything happened to me. I spent the next few days in a state of uneasy calm. I kept to my routines, but every sound, every shadow set my nerves on edge. One night, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. I grabbed the bat and crept downstairs, heart hammering. I found Daniel in the living room, rifling through drawers, his face wild. "Get out," I said, my voice steady. He turned, eyes blazing. "You did this, Dad. You made me desperate." I stood my ground. "You made yourself desperate. Now leave." He lunged at me, but I swung the bat, stopping him in his tracks. He stumbled back, then ran out the door, disappearing into the night. I called the police, filed another report, and changed the locks again. I realized that Daniel was spiraling, that he might do something truly dangerous. The next morning, I found a message spray-painted on the garage door. "This isn't over." I scrubbed it off, refusing to let him win. I called Mark, who advised me to stay somewhere else for a while. I packed a bag and went to the cabin, locking the doors, keeping my phone close. Linda visited, bringing food and comfort. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the lake. "I'm scared, Richard," she admitted. "So am I said. "But we'll get through this. I promise." We talked late into the night, sharing memories of Caroline, of Daniel as a boy, of the life we'd built together. I realized that despite everything, I still loved my son. But love didn't mean surrender. The next day, I received a call from the police. Daniel had been arrested for breaking into a neighbor's house, looking for money. He was being held on multiple charges. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. My son was lost, but for the first time in months I felt safe. I returned home, the house quiet and still. I repaired the damage, cleaned the rooms, and tried to reclaim a sense of normalcy. Linda moved back in, her presence a balm to my wounded spirit. We received word that Daniel was being held without bail. Rachel filed for divorce, citing abuse and addiction. The family I'd tried so hard to protect was shattered, but I knew it was the only way forward. I spent my days at the cabin, working with the charity, helping others who had lost their way. I found purpose in service, in giving back, in honoring Caroline's memory. One evening, as I sat on the porch, I received a letter from Daniel. The handwriting was shaky, the words raw. "Dad, I'm sorry, I lost everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know." Daniel. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face. I realized that forgiveness was possible, even after everything. I sat on the porch, Daniel's letter trembling in my hands. The lake was still, the sky streaked with the last light of day. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to protect my family, the sacrifices I'd made, the boundaries I'd let slip for the sake of peace. I realized that peace built on surrender was no peace at all. Linda joined me, her hand warm in mine. "What will you do?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "I don't know. Part of me wants to forgive him. Part of me wants to never see him again." She squeezed my hand. "You don't have to decide tonight." We sat in silence, the air thick with memory and regret. I thought of Caroline, her laughter echoing in the twilight, her belief that love could heal anything. I wondered if she would forgive Daniel. I wondered if I could. The next morning, I received a call from Mark. "Richard, the court date is set. Daniel's facing serious charges. The DA wants you to testify about the threats, the break-ins, the assault." Felt a wave of dread. "Do I have to?" Mark's voice was gentle. "It's your choice. But your testimony could make the difference." I spent the day wrestling with the decision. I walked the shoreline, the cold water lapping at my feet, the wind sharp in my face. I thought about justice, about mercy, about the line between protecting myself and destroying my son. That night, Linda and I talked late into the evening. "You have to do what's right for you," she said. "Not for Daniel, not for anyone else." I nodded, the weight of the choice settling in my chest. The day of the hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding. Daniel sat across from me, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. He wouldn't meet my gaze. The DA called me to the stand. I told the truth about the threats, the violence, the fear. I spoke of the love I still felt for my son, the hope that he might find his way back. When I finished, Daniel looked up, tears in his eyes. For a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, the boy I'd loved. The judge sentenced Daniel to rehab and probation with strict orders to stay away from me and Linda. As he was led from the courtroom, he paused, looking back at me. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. I nodded, my own tears falling. "I know, son. I know." Life settled into a new rhythm. Linda and I rebuilt our routines, finding comfort in small things. Morning coffee, walks by the lake, evenings spent reading by the fire. The house felt safe again. The shadows receding. I threw myself into charity work, helping families in crisis, sharing my story with those who needed hope. I found purpose in service, in giving back, in honoring Caroline's memory. Rachel reached out, apologizing for her part in the ordeal. She was rebuilding her life, focusing on her children, determined to break the cycle of pain. One afternoon, as I worked in the garden, Linda joined me, her eyes bright. "You did the right thing, Richard. You protected yourself. You protected us." I smiled, feeling the old wounds begin to heal. "I just wish it hadn't come to this." She hugged me, her arms strong around my shoulders. Sometimes the only way forward is through. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Daniel's counselor. "He's making progress. He talks about you often. He wants to make amends when you're ready." I folded the letter, hope blooming in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, forgiveness was possible. Spring arrived at the lake with a gentle hush. The trees budded, the air softened, and the world seemed to breathe again. I spent my days tending the garden, repairing the old dock, and volunteering at the charity Caroline had loved. The pain of the past months lingered, but it no longer ruled me. I had learned to live with the scars. One morning, as I was planting new roses by the porch, Linda came outside, a letter in her hand. "It's from Daniel," she said, her voice careful. I took the envelope, my hand steady. I opened it and read, "Dad, I know I can never undo what I did. I'm working hard in rehab. I think about you and Mum every day. I want to be better. I want to earn your forgiveness if you can ever give it. Love, Daniel." I sat on the porch, the letter in my lap, the sun warm on my face. I thought about forgiveness, about the difference between forgetting and moving forward. I realized that forgiveness was not a gift for Daniel, but for myself. That afternoon, I wrote back, "Daniel, I can't forget what happened, but I can forgive. I hope you find your way. When you're ready, my door is open. Dad." I mailed the letter, feeling a weight lift from my chest. The weeks passed. Linda and I found a new rhythm, quiet mornings, shared meals, laughter returning to the house. The charity flourished, and I found joy in helping others rebuild their lives. I spoke at meetings, telling my story, hoping it might help someone else find the strength to set boundaries, to choose dignity over fear. One evening, as the sun set, over the lake I heard footsteps on the dock. I looked up and saw Daniel, thinner, older, but with a new light in his eyes. He stopped a few feet away, uncertainty in his posture. "Hi, Dad." I stood, my heart pounding. "Hi, son." He looked at the water, then back at me. "I'm sorry for everything." I nodded, emotion thick in my throat. "I know." He took a hesitant step forward. "Can I come home? Just for a little while?" I opened my arms, and he came to me, the years of pain and anger melting away in the embrace. That night, we sat on the porch, the stars bright above us. Daniel told me about rehab, about the work he was doing, about the people he'd met who had lost even more than he had. He spoke of regret, of hope, of the desire to make things right. I listened, my heart full. I realized that this was the true victory, not the money, not the house, not the inheritance, but the chance to heal, to rebuild, to forgive. Linda joined us, her smile gentle. We sat together, a family remade by pain and forgiveness, by loss and love. Summer came, and with it, a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Daniel found a job in town, started volunteering at the charity, and slowly rebuilt his life. Rachel moved on, finding happiness for herself and her children. Linda and I traveled, visited old friends, and made new memories. The house was filled with laughter again, with the scent of fresh bread and blooming roses. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden, Daniel joined me. He handed me a small box. "Happy birthday, Dad." Inside was a simple key. "To the cabin," he said. "I want you to know I'll never try to take what's yours again. I want to earn your trust, one day at a time." I hugged him, tears in my eyes. "You already have, son." As the sun set over the lake, I realized that the greatest inheritance I could leave as not money or property, but the strength to stand up for myself, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to know when to let go.